Here are the top stories for today, April 21st, 2021. Beefing up vaccination, the Philippines will get another 500,000 doses of Sinovac jabs from China tomorrow. Lower pork import duties to stay for now. President Rodrigo Duterte urges the Senate to give the executive order on the measure a chance as the country picks up from the effects of African swine fever on the domestic supply. The government lauds the noble cause of setting up community pantries for the poor, but it says health protocols must be observed and that these must be spared from politics and ulterior motives. And more time for aid distribution. The deadline for the payout of emergency assistance to ECQ-affected residents is extended until May 15. Good day, I am William Theo. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. The country will receive 500,000 more doses of Sinovac vaccines tomorrow, April 22. Philippine Ambassador to China Jose Santiago Santa Romana said the Philippine Embassy in Beijing is now facilitating the shipment of the vaccines. The latest shipment is part of the government-procured Sinovac vaccines. He said the government is planning to purchase 1.5 million doses from Sinovac next month and will purchase more in the succeeding months for a total of 25 million doses by the end of the year. Santa Romana said another 500,000 additional doses of Sinovac jabs are expected to arrive in Manila next week. Lower import duties on pork will remain in place. This as President Rodrigo Duterte stood firm on his executive order lowering imported pork tariff rates as he urged senators to give the measure a chance. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the president appealed to the senators to wait for at least 2 months to see the impact of the EO 128 in the local hog industry. He maintained that the issuance of EO 128 aims to address the shortage of pork supply, stabilize the price of pork products, and minimize the inflation rate. Roque said the executive branch shares the same sentiment with the senators as it also seeks the recovery of the swine industry distressed due to African swine fever. Senate Minority Leader Juan Miguel Zubiri earlier said Upper Chamber is willing to negotiate with Duterte to recall his order on cutting pork tariffs. President Rodrigo Duterte has praised Filipinos for organizing community pantries across the country. These pantries serve as venues for donations for those affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. In a virtual press briefing, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said President Duterte welcomes all initiatives helping Filipinos severely affected by the health crisis. However, some community pantries temporarily stopped operating after the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, or NTF-ELCAC, shared posts on social media linking them to communist rebels. Roque said the president wants officials of the Anti-Insurgency Task Force to leave these pantries alone unless there are violations of health protocols. NTF-ELCAC spokesperson Lieutenant General Antonio Parlade Jr. earlier denied red tagging community pantry organizers but admitted that they are checking their backgrounds. While Filipinos welcome the opening of community pantries, the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, or NTF-ELCAC, is wary, saying communist movement is taking advantage of the Filipinos' bayanihan spirit. Is there any basis to doubt this noble cause? Benj Bondoc will tell us what other government officials have to say.
Presidential Communications Operations Office Under Secretary Lorraine Marie Badoy appealed to the Communist Party of the Philippines to stop its modus operandi under the guise of helping struggling Filipinos amid the COVID-19 pandemic. She says the terrorist group is making Filipinos believe that the government is inutile. Badoy, who is also the spokesperson of the NTF-ELCAC, says that while they are elated by the community pantries, asking for donations, especially dollars, is unnecessary as it is already enough to give according to one's capacity. A Facebook post by anti-communist page Peace Philippines, which was shared by the NTF-ELCAC, grabbed photos of community pantries that are allegedly being used by the communist group to launch a massive recruitment drive. Badoy said despite the supposed ulterior motive of some people behind the setting up of community pantries, the NTF-ELCAC would support those who embody the real Bayanihan spirit to help their fellow Filipinos survive the COVID-19 crisis. Meanwhile, the National Privacy Commission warned police officers against the alleged profiling of organizers of community pantries. It asked the PNP to ensure that the collection of personal information, if necessary, should be accomplished with transparency, legitimate purpose, and proportionality. The PNP has already denied allegations of profiling against community pantry organizers. PNP spokesperson Brigadier General Ronaldo Olay says they are now looking into these reports after several photos went viral on social media showing policemen questioning organizers of some community pantries in Metro Manila.
Huwag naman itong abusuhin o sakyan ng mga ibang mga grupo, no? Sa amin ay kung in the spirit of bayanihan ay talagang nagbibigay sila ng ayuda at walang ibang kulay, ay wala pong masama doon, no? Wala pong walang masama dahil pagtulong ito bayanihan in the name of bayanihan spirit. Pero pag sinakyan na ito ng ibang mga organisasyon na may ibang pakay, ay doon na magkakaroon ng ibang interpretasyon.
The Department of the Interior and local government, however, denied giving orders to the cops to look into community pantries across the country. Interior Secretary Eduardo Año said it should be encouraged as long as the intention is good and without political color. He also adds community pantry organizers must adhere to existing laws and local ordinances. PNP Chief General de Bolsinas says they are just keeping a close watch on the observance of minimum health standards, especially when these activities draw a huge crowd. Meanwhile, Justice Secretary Manaldo Guevara said persons voluntarily doing an act of kindness and compassion toward their neighbors should be left alone. He said it is not proper for law enforcement agents to interrogate them unless there is reason to believe that they are violating any law, ordinance, rule, or regulation. He also said organizers of community pantries have no legal duty or are under any compulsion to fill out any forms. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Benj Bondok.
As more people and groups join the noble cause of helping others through community pantries, some are taking an extra mile as they also want to nourish the people's spiritual needs. In this community pantry set up by the Eastern Police District, free Bibles are also given to beneficiaries. EPD Director Brigadier General Matthew Bakay says, amid the hardships due to the pandemic, it is important to remind people that God is always with us. The EPD's community pantry mostly caters to its areas of concern, particularly the cities of Pasig, Mandaluyong, Marikina, and San Juan. The community pantry complements the EPD's house-to-house distribution of food packs for poor families. Meanwhile, the Manila Cathedral has also joined the meaningful initiative. Aside from food and grocery items, free rosaries are also given to people lining up at the pantry. These include the 500 Years Mission Cross Rosaries and other rosaries donated by the Cathedral Souvenir Shop. Senior citizens and those with comorbidities are ensured of getting COVID-19 vaccines as local officials ramp up their inoculation program. Marita Moahe has the details.
In Manila, home service vaccination continues for bedridden senior citizen. Manila City Vice Mayor Hani Lacuna Pangan, who is also a doctor, personally administered the jabs to some senior patients. The local government launched its home service vaccination program to ensure that the seniors and those with comorbidities receive the COVID-19 jabs. Mayor Isko Moreno Dobagoso ordered barangay chiefs to submit a list of bedridden residents in their areas, including their caretakers, their address, and contact numbers. He also urged other residents to coordinate with their local health offices to schedule their home service vaccination. In Valenzuela City, the inoculation of the initial batch of 5,909 senior citizens is set to complete by tomorrow, April 21. The second batch will be accommodated April 23 to 30. AstraZeneca vaccines were given to the first 850 senior citizens who signed up for the Valenzuela City vaccination program, while the rest received the China-made Sinovac jabs. Vaccination for the A3 group aged 18 to 59 with comorbidities is ongoing and is simultaneously conducted with A2 or senior citizens. The city strictly implements an appointment system for vaccination. In Navotas, walk-in registration is now allowed for free vaccine shots. Mayor Toby Chanco said the walk-in system will be implemented in various sites after its successful implementation in Taonlaran Village. Registration booths will also be put up in vaccination centers. Inoculation of the elderly is ongoing from 8 a.m. to noon time, while persons with comorbidities will be accommodated 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. The local government also provides free pedicab rides for senior citizens and persons with disabilities going to vaccination centers. In Taguig, the local government has activated its home service vaccination program to inoculate bedridden senior citizens or those with underlying medical conditions. Mayor Lino Cayetano said they are deploying doctors and nurses to ensure that these individuals will have equal access to the COVID-19 vaccines. Residents who would like to request a home service vaccination for their bedridden family members may call the designated telephone numbers of Taguig Telemedicine in the 31 barangay health centers as well as the city's COVID-19 hotline. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Marita Muaje.
The United States government advised its citizens to avoid all travel to the Philippines as it tagged the country with a very high level of COVID-19 infections. The State Department issued the warning amid the rising number of COVID-19 incidents in the country. It also reminds people to exercise increased caution due to crime, terrorism, civil unrest, and kidnapping. The U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, raised to level 4 its COVID-19 notice for the Philippines, the highest in its COVID-19 warnings. It, however, warns people who are entering the country to get fully vaccinated before travel, wear a mask, stay 6 feet away from others, avoid crowds, and wash their hands. The State Department earlier said it will update its travel advisories to reflect the CDC's science-based health notices. Still to come, the fight for OFWs' rights continues. President Rodrigo Duterte calls for the complete abolition of the restrictive KAFALA system. And a lawmaker says the country has enough fiscal space for the proposed Bayanihan 3. Back after a quick break, this is the PNA Newsroom.
Alamin kung paano ang tamang pagsusuot ng surgical mask. Una, hawakan ang mask sa strap at siguruhing natatakpan nito ang inyong bibig at ilong. Tandaan, ang may kulay na bahagi ng mask ang dapat nasa labas. Ito lamang ang tamang paraan ng pagsuot nito. Ihulma ang nose piece o maliit na metallic strip ayon sa hugis ng inyong ilong. Iwasan ang paghawak sa inyong ilong at bibig. Kung marumi na ang mask, hubarin ito gamit ang strap at itapon ito sa isang basurahan. Siguruhin ang maayos na paghuhugas ng kamay gamit ang sabon at tubig. Ang surgical mask ay dapat gamitin ng mga pasyenteng may sakit sa baga o mga taong mayroong ubo, sipon at lagnat, mga nag-aalaga sa mga may sakit, at mga healthcare at frontline workers. Maaari ring magsuot nito kung kayo ay pupunta sa matataong lugar. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
Deadline for ayuda payout is extended until May 15. This following appeals from several local government units to extend the deadline for the distribution of assistance in NCR Plus, which covers Metro Manila and the provinces of Bulacan, Cavite, Laguna, and Rizal. Under the guidelines earlier released by the Department of the Interior and Local Government and the Department of Social Welfare and Development, local officials must complete the release of aid in 15 calendar days upon receipt of the funds if the assistance is in cash or within 30 calendar days if the assistance is in kind.
In-extend ang deadline na makumpleto ang pamamahagi ng financial assistance hanggang 15 ng Mayo 2021. Ito ay dahil sa mga sumusunod. Una, tayo nasa panahon po ng COVID-19. Bawal ang malakihang pagtitipon-tipon. Kailangan pangalagaan ang kaligtasan at kalusugan ng lahat. Pangalawa, inaayos ang paraan at ginagawang flexible ang pamamahagi kung ito ay automated o bahay-bahay. Pangatlo, may mga apila sa mga lokal na pamahalaan.
More local governments in the provinces come up with measures that will ensure the safety of senior citizens in getting the COVID-19 shots. The details from Chris Crismundo.
In Nueva Ecija, the local government spared their senior citizens from the usual sweltering atmosphere by vaccinating them at the Garden Park of a mall. This as Cabanatuan City Mayor Micah Elizabeth Vergara signed a deal with the management of SM City Cabanatuan and SM Mega Center for the free use of the mall facilities for COVID-19 vaccination activities. Some 100 elderlies were given the first dose of Sinovac when the vaccination for the group started. In Antique, vaccination for senior citizens starts today as it received 2,000 vials of Sinovac vaccines from the Department of Health. The vaccination is being held at the Evelio B. Javier Gymnasium. Seniors who could not go to the identified vaccination sites because of their physical condition will be visited by the local health teams in their own homes. And in Davao City, more than 93,000 senior citizens have been registered to receive the COVID-19 vaccine shots. Dr. Josephine Villafuerte, head of the vaccination cluster of Davao City, said she expects the number to increase as the registration is ongoing. The city government targets to inoculate 120,000 senior citizens. Villafuerte said the vaccination for seniors would also start as soon as the vaccination of medical frontline workers is over. She said the registration setup is expected to be more convenient anytime soon as the city will pilot the integration of the vaccination registration to the Safe Davao QR codes. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Chris Crismundo.
President Rodrigo Duterte on Tuesday called for the abolition of the controversial KAFALA scheme, a sponsorship system that monitors and restricts movement of migrant laborers. Duterte said the KAFALA system is unjust and exploitative towards migrant workers, and it denies their basic human right and freedom. Under the KAFALA scheme, the sponsor is usually the employer who is responsible for the immigration status and visa of the migrant worker. Workers cannot leave without their employer's consent, making them vulnerable to abuse. Duterte also acknowledged that the COVID-19 pandemic has put migrant workers under the KAFALA system in a more precarious position. He said the system must be dismantled in order to end inequities and suffering. Duterte said he welcomes the reform initiatives of Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, and Bahrain that would improve the working conditions of Filipino migrant workers. The government can fund the proposed Bayanihan 3 Act considering that the Philippines still has fiscal space for more government support towards recovery. This after the International Monetary Fund pronounced that the Philippines still has fiscal space which it could use to support its recovery from the coronavirus-induced economic crisis. Albay Representative Joey Salceda, chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, said the government can approve Bayanihan 3 with little adverse consequences on its credit standing. He noted that their priority is to support household income with government aid, protect jobs by supporting businesses, and stabilize prices. The proposed Bayanihan 3 earmarks 420 billion pesos for COVID-19 response and recovery interventions. It also allots 25 billion for COVID-19 treatment and vaccines and 5 billion for the rehabilitation of areas impacted by recent floods and typhoons. The Department of Labor and Employment in Region 10 turned over about 500,000 pesos worth of livelihood assistance for cassava marketing to 124 farmers in Magsaysay, Misamis Oriental. The Mindulao Farmers Agrarian Reform Community Cooperative received the aid through the Dole 10 Misamis Oriental Provincial Field Office. Chairperson Ediver Joy Buyan said, despite the pandemic, the demand for cassava products remains high. He said the cooperative decided to seek aid not only to address the demand of local consumers, but also to contribute to poverty alleviation in their own community. He said the farmer members were more than willing to take part in the expansion of cassava production. The Dole Integrated Livelihood Project or Kabuhayan program continues to the government's agenda of inclusive growth through massive job generation and substantial poverty reduction by providing livelihood assistance. The Anti-Red Tape Authority said permits are not needed in establishing community pantries, but these initiatives should be coordinated with their respective barangays. ARTA Director General Jeremiah Belhica reminded barangay officials and community pantry organizers in Quezon City that a permit is not required in putting up such an initiative. But he urged organizers to coordinate with their barangay to ensure orders such as physical distancing and other minimum health protocols. In a television interview Tuesday, Interior Undersecretary Martin Dino said organizers should secure a permit from the local government since violations of protocols have been observed in some community pantries. Belhica said he already talked with DILG Secretary Eduardo Año and Dino to remind them that permits are not needed for such an initiative. Meanwhile, the ARTA chief said this initiative should not be politicized amid reports of red tagging some community pantries. Up next, tourist sites has temporary COVID-19 facilities? No problem, according to the Department of Tourism. And no let up in the fight against climate change. The United Nations appeals for real action and specific measures to curb the global phenomenon. Details ahead. Stay with the PNA Newsroom.
Alamin ang tamang paraan ng pag-ubo upang mapigilan ang paglaganap ng Coronavirus Disease 2019. Ugaliing magdala ng panyo o tissue. Kung uubo o babahing, takpan ang buong ilong at bibig gamit ang panyo o tissue. Kung walang dalang panyo o tissue, maaaring gamitin ang braso na pantakip. Kung nakararamdam na kailangan umubo o bumahing, agad na dumistansya sa mga tao sa paligid. Huwag dumura kung saan-saan, gumamit ng tissue at itapon sa basurahan. Ugaliin ang paghuhugas ng kamay at paggamit ng alcohol o hand sanitizer upang mamatay ang mikrobyo. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
You're still watching the PNA Newsroom. The Department of Tourism or DOT expressed support for the construction of medical facilities in Rizal Park to help the country better respond against the COVID-19 pandemic. Tourism Secretary Bernadette Romulo Puyat made this statement during the groundbreaking of Manila Mega COVID Field Hospital, a temporary facility that will soon rise at the Burnham Green of Rizal Park. The temporary hospital in Rizal Park can accommodate at least 500 patients with mild to moderate COVID-19 symptoms. Also approved was the proposal to use Quirino Grandstand as the site of a temporary drive-through vaccination center, which can accommodate 350 to 450 persons per day. Mayor Francisco Isko Moreno Domagoso has committed to make the facilities available even to those residing outside the city of Manila. Puyat hopes the steps made by the City of Manila and the National Parks Development Committee would be replicated by other local government units. The Integrated Provincial Health Office of Lanao del Sur has started administering the second dose of COVID-19 vaccines to Islamic preachers and prospective pilgrims to Saudi Arabia. Lanao del Sur Health Chief Dr. Allen Minalang said able-bodied senior citizens and health workers in Marawi City and from nearby towns received the second dose of Sinovac vaccines as part of preparations for the annual pilgrimage to Mecca. The IPHO Lanao del Sur recently received more than 5,000 doses for sheikhs, pilgrims, and medical teams participating in the 2021 pilgrimage. Saudi Arabian authorities earlier said it would only allow Islam faithful with 2 doses to perform the year-round Umrah pilgrimage starting from the month of Ramadan. An advisory from IPHO Lanao del Sur said Muslims who are fasting need not worry about the vaccination as injection of vaccines is allowed by Islam. In our foreign news, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for specific commitments and real action to fight climate change. At the launching of the State of the Global Climate in 2020 report on Monday, the UN chief spoke out about the severity of the climatic disruptions that have raged the planet. Guterres said the year 2020 was another unprecedented year of extreme weather and climate disasters because of disruption caused by human activities, decisions, and folly. He said the UN is building a global coalition committed to net zero emissions to cover all countries, cities, regions, businesses, and financial institutions. He noted that subsidies to polluting fossil fuels must be shifted to renewable energy. Guterres also called on the developed countries to deliver on climate finance for the developing world, particularly the promise of $100 billion a year made at the G7 summit in June. In sports, Talisay continued its domination of the Pilipinas Vismin Super Cup Visayas leg after drubbing Tabogon 85-65 on Tuesday at the Alcantara Civic Center in Cebu. With the victory, the Aqua Stars completed a 5-0 sweep of the first round of the classification phase. Eji Mojica and Patrick Abahog each tallied 13 points to lead the way for Talisay. Aqua Stars coach Aldrin Morante now looks forward to a tougher challenge in the second round. One particular team he is wary about is ARQ Lapu-Lapu, especially with its key players except for Rendel Senining returning to action after serving their suspensions. Meanwhile, Lapu-Lapu fell prey to Mandaue on Tuesday 66-77. Brian Mendoza finished with 19 points, 10 rebounds and 2 assists, 1 steal and 3 blocks for Mandaue, which moved up to solo second place. Vincent Mingito led Lapu-Lapu, which slipped to third with 16 points, 13 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, and 1 block. The Super Cup earlier sanctioned several players of Lapu-Lapu amid allegations of game fixing in their recent match against Siquijor. Here's another look at today's biggest stories. Beefing up vaccination, the Philippines will get another 500,000 doses of Sinovac jabs from China tomorrow. Lower pork import duties to stay for now. President Rodrigo Duterte urges the Senate to give the executive order on the measure a chance as the country picks up from the effects of African swine fever on the domestic supply. The government lauds the noble cause of setting up community pantries for the poor, but it says health protocols must be observed and that these must be spared from politics and ulterior motives. And more time for aid distribution. The deadline for the payout of emergency assistance to ECQ-affected residents is extended until May 15. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, visit our webpage or head on to the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know. From the PNA Newsroom, we tell stories that inspire change. I am William Theo. Good day. Stay safe, everyone.